What's going on, man?
How we doing? How we doing?
Doing great. I'm excited for another book club.
Yeah, it's a long time in the making. I feel like, we had our sights set on what, one book a month, and here we are in July on our third book.
We can
So,
still average one book a month, though. We just the readers, listeners, get
ooh,
ready for a fast paced second half of the year.
yeah, right. There's going to be a lot of picture books. Get ready.
That's right. A lot of
Catch up.
children's books.
Hmm.
Well, let's get right into it, man. This next book that we chose was called Drive by a gentleman named Daniel H. Pink. And for a little background on how this book even came to fruition, this was actually a book that was gifted to me by a good friend of mine. So shout out to that friend. He We were having a conversation about, just not just about motivation, but just trying to be locked in and then, we both have these goals and these dreams and these aspirations that we want not only for ourselves but for our families. And he was like, you know what, Jared, I really think you would resonate well with this book. And he wasn't wrong. This book falls into that uh bucket of self-improvement books, which, as you guys know, for the ones that have been listening to us for a little bit, and for maybe any of those that are new, this is right up my alley. I love self-improvement books. I love reading about just how to be a better person, a better leader, different ways and different techniques and skill sets that maybe I can use to improve my ability to succeed in all the ways I want to exceed in life. And this was a good one. It was one that shares a lot of similar principles. You start to read a handful of these books and you start to see a lot of overlapping themes, and those would be some of the big themes we get into in a moment. But I like it, man. I like it. What did you think about the book? I know it's a little bit different than your typical taste.
Yeah, I was going to say, on the flip side, I am the opposite. I absolutely despise self-improvement books. This particular book took me probably 6 months to read. It was extremely difficult. I won't say any. I'll keep a lot of my comments for the end. But this, it's funny. I enjoyed. It gets to the point where the very end of it kind of gets into like the business aspect, and obviously you and I are both very like entrepreneurial minded, and that's when I was like, huh, this pain that this book has caused me is now it's actually like, oh, it actually is pretty useful. And I I hate to say it, but I've actually started using some of the stuff, some of the principles like in practice. So I want to hate on it, and I do hate on it, but this was again pushing me out of my comfort zone, like we talked about. So as much as I despised every second I had to read it, it was actually very, very much worthwhile in the end. So stick with it, guys. That's all I can say. If this isn't your cup of tea, stick with it.
All right, well, I definitely want to hear some of these principles later on, man.
Yeah.
I think the people want to hear too. That way, there might be something they resonate with. You never know. You never know. But lo and behold, all right, we got our book Drive here. And one of the quotes from the book, I like this theme we're getting into, where we pick one quote that really sticks with one of us to open things up here. And the quote says, for those that are maybe listening on a drive or somewhere and they can't be seeing the screen right now, the value of a life can be measured by one's ability to affect the destiny of one less advantaged. Since death is an absolute certainty for everyone, the important variable is the quality of life one leads between the times of birth and death.
It's powerful
I think it
stuff, man.
says I think it says a lot within itself. There's not a whole lot of further explanation actually needed there. It's just about a matter of uh I mean, you talked about earlier about how much success, what does success mean for an individual, and wanting to be the most successful people we can, and what does that mean for each of us? And I think for any human, really, the biggest value, or how you quantify how successful you are, is what's the impact you've made on others. And I think that's what this quote is all about. And so, what a good way to start off talking
Mm.
about a book about drive here. So, one of the big key takeaways from the book, Josh, and definitely jump in as you see fit here. One of the big key takeaways was just talking about, okay, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And how much does one overpower the other? How much do you try to use both to your advantage? Can you get distracted by one versus the other? And what this book really talks about is how much more important intrinsic motivation is than extrinsic motivation. And I don't know about you, but I'm definitely the type of person that is easily led by, I won't say easily led, but can have a more powerful boost of motivation from extrinsic motivating
Of
factors
course. Of
than
course.
intrinsic motivating factors. Right? Examples could be increase in pay, or you get some sort of any sort of reward, right? Whether it's pay, maybe you get extra PTO because you've done something really well, whatever it may be. You get this external reward provided to you, this gift, and that gives you this little boost of motivation. Now, what this book talks about is how much, yes, that can be beneficial in the short term, but for most of us in the long term, if that's all you're driven by, then it's going to be a really, really short fuse, because more times than not, that stuff's going to run out eventually.
Right.
Right. You
I
might,
thought
go ahead,
I was
man.
going to say I thought that was probably one of the most intriguing points. Is they Daniel talks a lot about, he goes through, basically he calls it motivation one, motivation two, and motivation three, right? So motivation one is just your biological needs, right? You got to eat, you got to drink water, you got to, have safety. But then it gets into, like, again, this, the extrinsic, which he refers a lot to as like a carrot and a stick, right? So carrot being the reward, and then the stick being the punishment. And then, of course, you get into like the intrinsic part, which is, again, the desire to do something that's actually meaningful. And I thought it was interesting. So he uses a lot of studies in his writing to connect to, like, again, the points he's trying to make. And I thought the interesting thing is that he brings up these studies where initially, these people are being rewarded, right? These people are being rewarded, like, hey, you know, if you do this certain thing in a certain amount of time, we'll give you $5, right? Or you'll win a prize. And and then they had, like, they had so they had several groups doing this. And then they had another group, basically, it was like, hey, solve this if you can. Like, they basically were just like, hey, try and do it if you can. And, like, they found that the people were more motivated to just, like, achieve something because they wanted to, not because someone told them to, because of a reward. And what they found is, I can't recall the exact study, because I feel like they referenced a lot of this, but they found, like, the people that were doing it for no reward at all, actually, they would solve that puzzle or that problem faster.
Hmm.
And there was, there was, like, more enjoyment. So I thought it was just really interesting how, again, you include like a reward, and it actually can be detrimental to, like, the results you're looking for, right?
Exactly, because that extrinsic reward is going to really take away and dampen somebody's intrinsic ability or
Hmm.
want to. And so as soon as that internal, I'm doing this for the enjoyment of doing it, goes away, exactly right, man. It just, next thing you know, the production not only does, and one thing they really talked about was, not only did they see the quantity of doing something go down, how many puzzles are you going to try and solve, the quality was going down as well,
Hmm.
for sure. And like you said, it's, you have the things that are necessary in life, right? We all gotta really try to make sure we have a roof over our head, we got food, we got water, we have our basic necessities. But once we get past that, what else is there if you don't have this internal desire to really do what you want to do and get it done to a high quality standard? Now, one of the other big talking points here that I found really interesting was having just different behavioral experiments. So, something that they really went over was, okay, can you have this task that is more just, all right, you are going to try to accomplish one thing in order to get to the next. Can you do A to get to B? Can you do B to get to C? And then they talk about doing tasks where you find yourself just doing it for the pure enjoyment of doing so. And similar to what we were just mentioning, how much does that change not only how much you produce, but what's the quality of what it is that you're producing? And they talk about flow state. And I'm a big believer in flow state. It's something that you really don't realize you're in until afterwards. I feel like when you start to self reflect. Is that something you feel like you've ever noticed, Josh, where you, whatever the task may be, where you hit this flow state and next thing you know, hours have gone by, you didn't realize all that time had passed, or you didn't realize that, you're just, let's say for an example, you're writing a paper and you're just writing and writing and writing. Next thing you know, you have 10 pages that have been written. Have you ever hit a flow state, whether in school, whether in work, whether in exercise, whatever it may be?
Oh yeah, all the time. Again, and for me, it's like really when I'm doing my passions, right? So like when I'm woodworking, right? I am one of those people like I'll just get into it. I got some music going, and the next thing I know, it's like midnight, and I just spent 8 hours like building this thing. Never look at the clock. Don't look at my phone because I'm just like enjoying what I'm doing, right? And it's whether or not I sell something or I keep it for myself, it's just like the fact that I'm like doing something that brings me joy. It's just like the time flies by, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I think I'm with you, man. I think it's intriguing.
And it's
Can you
powerful.
give me a little bit? So for the people that don't know, what exactly is flow state, Jared?
Well, it's kind of just that, right? I mean, a flow state is hitting a state of hitting a mindset where you are so focused on the task at hand that virtually nothing else really matters, or at least doesn't matter anywhere near to the extent of what it is you're working on. And so you
Right.
hit a flow state, or you hit this mindset where I'm so locked into what it is that I'm doing that I haven't realized hours have passed. I haven't thought, maybe I missed a couple meals. I wasn't even thinking about food because I was just so locked in on what it was I was doing. Nothing else matters. You really get this, depending on what it is you're doing, this healthy amount of tunnel vision to complete the task at hand.
Yeah, that's actually. I mean, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. Like it's really, in essence, it's tunnel vision, right? There's one thing you're focused on, one thing and one thing alone, and you'll do whatever you can to complete that until it's done, till you
And
cross
what's
the finish line.
interesting about a book like this is that it starts talking about, as we keep going on in the book, and in that same camp, right, that you'll see in maybe a lot of different self-improvement books, is can you continue the work when you are no longer in that flow state? Though I think that flow state, it almost becomes a little bit of a high, almost like that runner's high. And it can be really easy to be super productive when you're in that flow state and you have that high. But what happens when you leave that flow state, or that high is gone? Can you continue to try to be just as productive?
Right?
And that can be a bit of a challenge.
Can
Now
you
we talk
replicate? Can you replicate that?
exactly. Now, one of the examples, like you mentioned, they did a lot of studies in this book to reference a lot of their talking points. And one of the studies they did was the candle problem. And if you guys have had a chance to read this book yet, you'll know that the candle problem is that they present numerous people with a candle, a box, and I think some tacks, like those sticky tacks. And they're like, okay, how can you get the candle to stick to the wall? All right. And this is a candle that is actively burning. How can you get the candle to stick to the wall? And one of the things they talk about, now we talked about tunnel vision when you're in that flow state. This is talking about a different type of tunnel vision. This is talking about creativity. And can you get yourself to a point when you're thinking outside of the box, which I thought was really, really interesting. I don't know about you, Josh. When I was reading this, I tried to not look ahead or read
Yeah.
ahead to figure out what the answer was as I was reading it. And I definitely, my first answer was not what they ended up deciding to do in the book either. I definitely would have been the one like struggling at that for a minute, but it was just a fun way to really harp on the fact that I think too many times in life, and I'm speaking more for myself right now, but too many times in life am I like, there, this is the way this one thing has to be done, and I'll chip at it, I'll chip away at it for hours doing it one particular way, when I probably would have been much better off taking a step back, maybe looking at the big picture a little bit more, thinking outside of the box, and just knowing there is rarely ever is there just one particular way that a task gets accomplished in life.
What's the saying? There's more than one way to eat an elephant or something like that.
I've never heard that saying
Am I
before.
making that up? One more than
I've
one way to
never
skin a
heard
cat.
that.
Maybe that's maybe that's the phrase.
Maybe.
Anyway, we're probably not going to be sponsored by PETA anytime soon. So,
but yeah, interesting stuff nonetheless, man. Nonetheless, now you were talking about this, right? The carrot and the stick, and this is definitely something they spoke a lot about this, and that motivation type 1 or versus type 2 motivation, and how much that carrot and the stick, that external reward, can be more or less distracting than anything else. It slowly eats away at our own internal drive. And they talked about, I think it was three. Now, again, the 7 deadly flaws, which I'll briefly go through, and pretty much saying how the 7 different ways that these external rewards can eat at us. But one of the biggest things, and I've definitely felt this, and I think I would be curious to know if you resonate with this at all, Josh, because you're big on creativity, and knowing you all the years that I've known you, I think you're also really big on being able to do things your way, right? Like you like to be able to stretch that creativity, even if it fails, I think you get a lot of enjoyment out of knowing that you tried it, and you tried it differently than how everybody else tried it. You're going to take one way when everybody wants to go the other, just to see what happens, right? And I think that's a good thing. I think there's a lot of good things that come out of that. Would
a
you
lot of
agree with
bad
that?
things. Yeah, I mean, also has got me in trouble in the past. So, but yeah, no, I mean, I think you're spot on, man. I think, like, especially again, I know we want to tell people a little bit about ourselves as we're doing this as well, but yeah, I mean, I like to think that's probably one of my best qualities, is like my ability to kind of like observe from outside the field. But then, you get this, you get this like extrinsic motivation, right? So like, I won't say too many specifics, but like, a job that starts like eating away at you because, it's not something necessarily you want to be doing. And I have noticed like things that don't motivate me, but I still have to do, because again, we've got these motivations like eating and, safety, like shelter. So it's like, I need to fulfill those motivations. So I have to work, but it's not necessarily what motivates me. And I have noticed that I feel like that has almost like hampered some of my creativity at times, right? Because, you know, sometimes, if you're completing a task, maybe I wouldn't do it differently, but like we need it done efficiently. So I have to do it a very specific way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I'll never forget, I was listening to something. I don't know if it was doom scrolling on social media or something, but I heard a quote going off of what you just said. I heard a quote somebody said, because I've had to tell myself this, right? A lot of times where I've worked a lot of different places, had a lot of different experiences as a physical therapist, and you see a lot of things done a lot of different ways. And you don't always agree, especially as a travel PT. You're only there for a few months, so who knows, like, how invested are they in you, and vice versa. But this quote I heard was, and it really hit home with me, was stop trying to be the rebel in a company if it's not your dream. And what they were saying
Dude,
was,
I
you're
love that.
working for
I love
somebody,
that.
and I might have butchered it a little bit, but essentially what they're saying is, you're working for somebody, you're working for their dream.
Right.
So don't get mad when they don't want to do things the way you want to do it, because it's
Yeah.
not your dream. That's the whole point. It's their dream. And so until you're ready to start working on your own dream, you need to do what's in line with their dream, because that's who you're working for. And that really hit home with me when
Damn,
I was
Jared.
I
Some
know, man.
powerful shit right there.
That really hit home with me when I was doing
Yeah.
travel PT, because I was working a lot of places that although I had a lot of enjoyment working in these places, did not always agree with how things were being done, and yeah, it was just it gets interesting when you're day after day having to show up and having to really dampen your own creativity, dampen your
Yep.
own mindset, the ways you want to have things be done because of exactly that. Yeah. But these seven deadly flaws, right? So we mentioned it. We kind of talked about it throughout this process: extinguishing intrinsic motivation, diminishing performance, crushing that creativity. It can actually crowd out good behavior, right? I found that really interesting. Of you may naturally be the type of person, and hopefully everybody listening to this is, you do things just for the good of the people, right? But when there starts being money involved and other types of extrinsic rewards, all of a sudden morals can get a little bit more gray, and people start not necessarily doing things just out of the goodness of their heart.
Mm.
Okay, going right into the next ones, they might encourage things like cheating, taking shortcuts, certain unethical behavior. When it came to that taking the shortcut, one thing that always hits home is the age old example of the tortoise and the hare, right? Like, are you trying to do things quickly because just by getting it done first, you think you're going to get more of that external reward, or are we trying to do things the right way? Um, and then the last two are just it might become addictive. So whatever that external reward is might become addictive, and that really takes away from the point of what you're doing. And then just fostering that short-term thinking. All in all, pretty much saying that quality of what you do goes down the more and more you're solely driven by those external rewards. These were three main purposes, Josh, that this book was talking about. And if you're following along, they kind of give a nice review of them. They talk about them in depth, but then they give a nice review of them starting on page 145. And the three main topics that they talked about when it came to the internal ways that we want to be really fostering how we execute is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Now, for you, Josh, you just mentioned this, really being able to do things and really being able to use your own creative outlet to do things the way you want to do them. But there's also the mastery. And I found this really interesting. I think both of us take a lot of pride in wanting to do whatever the work is that we're doing, wanting to do it to the best of our ability. I think we both, in our own ways, are perfectionists. And I thought this was really interesting. I never would have thought that, and I've never thought that my mastery and my skill set has ever been limited by external rewards. Have you ever felt that way?
That my mastery has been limited by my external rewards.
Yeah. So have you ever felt like you no longer are able to try to achieve something to your highest ability because you're limited by an external reward, meaning maybe you've wanted more time to perfect on your craft, or maybe you felt like going a certain route was going to help you become the best Josh you can be at your job, but due to a reward of, well, if you get it done in this time, or if you go through this company to accomplish whatever it is, then we'll consider that a success. Not if you do it the way you want to do it. Have you ever felt that way with anything in life? It could be work, it could be personal.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's easy to say, like, with work, there's limitations of getting in the way of mastery, right? Because okay, let's just say, for example, I can use a real world experience, like an actual thing that happened to me, right? So I was working on this credential because I thought it would, give me a pay bump, or it was going to open all these new avenues. And after I got it, I just basically got like a pat on the back from the boss, and I was like, you know okay, so what was the point of this? Why would I keep going if there's not going to be any reward for me? Um, but
See,
again,
and you see how dangerous that is?
yes, exactly.
You were
So it
searching for that external reward,
absolutely.
and when it didn't come, you're like, well, what's the point in me
Yes.
continuing to take these extra courses?
So this is again,
Dang.
this is, I mean, truly, like this is why this book, as much as I like, it was rough, it was, it was a tough pill to swallow. Like it really, there is some very meaningful, like, purpose, like there's some meaningful points in here that I think would probably resonate with anybody, and I'm sure we can all kind of relate again to like just this the interpretation of just motivation in general. But kind of back to your question of just like mastery. Mastery is, I think we have to look at mastery as a journey, right? It's not just a destination. what do they tell you? Like, if you think you've mastered it, like go back and try and do it. Like, there's no such thing as like you've never truly mastered every single aspect of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, right? Whatever that may be. Like, let's just say you're trying to master chess, right? You're going to be a chess master. Well, there's always going to be new moves that you'll probably have to learn, right? I actually read something today. I know this is a little bit irrelevant, but I think it kind of ties to the fact like there's always something new to be learned. There is the amount of chess moves that you can do, you know, in the game. There's more moves. Like there's almost like an infinite number of moves for like chessboards than there's like more chess moves than there are like stars or something crazy like that.
Damn.
It is like truly like at so I guess my whole point in this is there really is, it's a journey. It's not a destination. So if you think you've got it, reflect, go back and see how you can, what else you can improve upon, because there always is something that, to be learned.
Yeah, I agree with that. I got into an argument with a buddy of mine once because I forget what the word was we were using. I don't know if it was expert or master or whatever it was. And as kind of what my argument was, I don't think there's such thing as an expert in anything. I don't think my argument was that I don't think there's one person out there who knows it all in whatever their
Right.
profession is. I'm a big believer in always reaching for perfection, knowing it's something I'll never get to.
Yeah,
Right. That exact
exactly.
reason. Things always evolve, things change.
Yep.
But it's the journey of trying to get there that makes the person, right? Exactly what you're saying.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, and so I thought that was super interesting. And then that third one, purpose, right? They really talked on and what I liked about this portion of the book, kind of what you were saying at the top of the discussion, was that this portion of the book starts to get to how does this reflect in business, and both of us being entrepreneurs and being business owners as well as employees, and I think how this book can be a connection point for so many people is that a lot of us have at least seen the one side of it, which is as an employee. And then as you try to make that transition to entrepreneurship, you start to see it on the other side as the business owner. And so you really want to make sure that you as a business owner, should you eventually have employees or maybe you have co-owners, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you can foster an environment that doesn't dampen these three things, right? No matter what external rewards are necessary, you want to make sure that you don't dampen these three things. And the final one of those three being purpose. And that's always, in my opinion, one of the most powerful ones, because you want to make sure that somebody's why for getting into that field from the beginning is never lost either, right? Because that was the original starter, and always being able to remember your own why in terms of what it is you're doing is huge. And if you lose that, then I feel like you lose everything, right? You kind of lose yourself once you've lost your purpose. And it's scary. It's kind of scary to think that way, because so many people, I feel like, spend their whole lives working with a lost purpose, that lost creativity, and no desire to become the best they can be. And I don't know, man. I feel like I would have such a hard time sleeping at night knowing I took that away from somebody.
I read a quote, and this is not in Daniel Pink's book. This is something I think I was just probably doom scrolling, and I saw it, and I think it was pretty powerful because, again, purpose really is like if there's no why behind any of this, it's like it's all for nothing, right? And I think it's intriguing. So the quote I looked up was basically, and I'll read it in a second, but essentially it's like, we see these people that are like achieving things, that we look up to, that we aspire to be. We try and we see them and we try and almost replicate what they're doing by like having our own purpose and saying, well, hey, they did that, I could probably do something similar to that. And the quote is, I am somehow less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops. And that's Stephen Jay Gould. And I think the interesting thing behind that, behind that quote is that there is probably people that could have achieved amazing things, right? There's so many people that could have, that probably had this bigger purpose in their head, but they didn't have, you know, maybe they didn't have the autonomy, right? They didn't have the ability to do this. And I just that quote just hit me like a freight train, like knowing that there is people out there that probably are so, they have these ideas in their head, and they know that life is so much more meaningful, but either, it was a time in history when they couldn't, they couldn't pursue that, or,
Hmm.
again, they don't have just the means, they don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't, it seems like fruitless, right?
Yeah.
So
Just that quote alone is motivating, right? Because it's almost like a shame on you type of thing, right? And
right, yeah,
where it's like you have all, because I agree, there's people out there through every lifetime that has exactly that, but for whatever reason, they weren't in an environment to be able to pursue whatever it was they wanted to pursue. So it's like,
right,
how dare we have the means to do so and not try to do it to our best ability, you know?
bingo. We have every possibility. Sure, maybe you're limited on, finances or whatever, but it's like to to not even try, that almost seems like a crime in itself.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. So it sounds like this book really turned around on you. It started off rough for you, Josh, and then you ended up starting to like it quite a bit near the end.
I I think like might be a strong word, but I accepted it. I accepted it as like, hey, yes, there's some very impactful insights in this book. And I again, I so it did take me 8 months, like I've mentioned before. It took me 8 months to read
First
this
you
book.
said 6, now you're saying 8.
I
It took
embellish a
him a
little bit.
year. It took him a
I
year, everybody.
yeah. We'll round up eventually by the end of this podcast. It'll probably be 12 to 18 months. But I was fortunate because when I was reading this book, I got this used, right? Because sustainability, we can recycle or whatever and reuse things. But whoever had read this book before, I highlighted, they dog-eared pages. And I know we've talked about this before, Jared, but I actually enjoyed it because I was like, oh wow, this must be really meaningful. This must be like something that I should remember. And sure enough, like, when we were prepping for this, I was kind of going back and like checking out the dog-eared pages. And so all that to say is, yes, this book, everyone should read it. Even if they don't like it, again, push through, push through, push through.
I think it's worth the read. And one thing that is really valuable is that at the end of the book, they start giving much more real life examples and things you can do, tangible things you can do in different real world scenarios that connect with anybody at any different stages of life. So yeah, I agree. Highly recommend to give it a read. Again, shout out to my friend who actually gifted me the book. So appreciate him for that. Now we go to I don't think it's going to show up individually, but we're going to go to the ratings. Okay. So Josh is a tough crowd over there in
That was a tough
Chattanooga. It
critic.
must be.
When I
Dang.
said when I said when I said that this book took me 6 to 8 months, I don't actually remember how long it took, but I could read about 4 to 5 pages at a time before I started doing the nod off. And I wasn't reading this, before bed. It wasn't like the middle of the day when it's nap time. I would try and read this, and I'd be reading during lunch, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. It took me. So like you had just mentioned, I think that the whole book is maybe a little over 200 pages. I didn't really start getting inspired until there is a section, and it's called it's like the toolkit. And basically, it kind of goes over 9 strategies for awakening your motivation. And then it also connects to like how you should act if you have your own business. And this is when I was like, wow, this is good. Like, this is good quality stuff. I will say I will probably go back and reference this if I ever start my own company, because this is high quality stuff. So I gave it a low rating because it was painful for me. I'm not a self-improvement guy. I am not a self-improvement guy, and I think there's a lot of good nuggets in here. I thought it probably could have been a 20-page, like it probably could have been a little 20-page, something, you read
Mr.
on like
Pink,
a Wikipedia
I
page.
apologize. Mr. Pink, I apologize if you ever see this
Yeah.
this book club of your book. Dang.
You can go off on me, Mr. Pink. You can.
Well, I disagreed. I thought it was a great book, obviously. That's why I picked it for the book club. I thought that there are certainly some points that were maybe a little overwritten about. Could have been maybe, in some areas where could have been a little different or a little shorter. But overall, I thought it was a great book. I thought it did a really, really good job of just breaking down and highlighting, again, for somebody, and maybe this is primarily for somebody who does want to eventually be in that more leadership role, where you can not only get those nuggets at the end, like you mentioned, but throughout the book, just really good talking points about making sure you're setting up an environment for your peers that they can succeed to their fullest extent, and what that means. And all in all, just being a good human in the process. So really enjoyed it, Mr. Pink. We appreciate you nonetheless for giving us some good things to chat about here on the podcast. And for the listeners, I do highly recommend you going ahead and read the book, if nothing else, for those nuggets throughout the way. I'm a big believer, Josh, that if I could read a book and I get even one thing from it that I feel like I can use into my day-to-day practice, it was worth the read. Do you feel like there was at least one thing you got from the book that would be useful?
Oh, yeah.
For you?
I mean, I think I've said that. So I was actually going to thank you for, again, pushing me out of my comfort zone and making me read this book. It was torture for me, but it was, again, at the end of the day, I came out stronger. It's like in Shawshank Redemption, when he's like, crawled through 500 yards of shit and came out clean on the other side. Like it was a tough journey. It was a tough journey. But at the end of the day, yes, I would say there is multiple nuggets that I've gained from this. So I want to thank you for the book recommendation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And next up, tell them a little bit what we got next, Josh. This was your pick. Let them know.
All right. So yes. So this is just I'm excited. I'm excited for us to talk about this. The movie came out not too long ago.
Have you seen it yet?
I actually did just see it. It came out on Amazon. I did watch it. I wanted to be prepped and ready. It is on Amazon. So if you can't read the book, at least see the movie. It's not the same. I will say, I think Ryan, I think Ryan Gosling, he's one of my favorite actors. He does really well. But all that to say, Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary, I'm excited to talk about it. If you like space, I think you'll really enjoy it. So,
all right. Sounds good, man. Well, that's it for book club. We apologize that we took a little long, but nonetheless. Oh, wait a minute. Because the average was a 6.5, it technically didn't get the armchair analysis stamp, right?
It did not get the gold stamp.
It did not get a gold star, but nonetheless, go read the book. Till next time, we appreciate y'all. Armchair analysis. Let's get it.
Y'all come back now, you hear?